Welcome to our channel. Today, we're talking about the book,
Okay.
What Are You Doing With Your Life? By Jiddu Krishnamurti. You might not recognize the name immediately,
Right.
but Krishnamurti was a renowned
Yeah.
philosophical teacher whose work has really impacted millions.
It really has.
In fact, Time magazine even named him
Wow.
one of the 5 saints of the 20th century,
Oh, wow.
alongside figures like
Yeah.
the Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa,
Yeah.
and some serious company.
It really is, and it speaks to the depth and the impact of his ideas.
Absolutely.
This book, in particular, grapples with some of those big existential questions we all face. It's not about offering easy answers, but rather encouraging us to take responsibility for our lives and find meaning amidst all the complexity.
Okay, so let's dive into some of those complexities.
Okay.
What are some of the key themes
Right.
or ideas that you found
Yeah.
particularly insightful?
One of the core concepts in the book
Yeah.
is Krishnamurti's understanding of the self.
Okay.
He challenges this notion that the self is this fixed, unchanging entity.
Interesting.
Instead, he sees it as this fluid collection of thoughts, experiences, and desires.
So it's not about who we are,
Right.
but about what makes us up.
Yeah.
That seems like it has a lot of implications
Yeah, it does.
for how we view ourselves in the world.
Absolutely. He argues that this constantly shifting self is often the source of our conflicts and suffering. We cling to certain ideas about who we are,
Okay.
and when those ideas are challenged or disrupted,
Right.
it creates a sense of unease and disharmony.
So self-knowledge
Yeah.
is kind of a double-edged sword.
It is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
The more we understand ourselves,
Yeah.
the more we might realize how much is actually in flux.
That's a really interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
He's not saying that self-knowledge is bad.
No, not at all.
Right.
In fact, he sees it as essential for transformation, but it requires a willingness to let go of those fixed ideas we have about ourselves and to embrace the fluidity and impermanence of life.
He has a powerful quote in the book, something like, to transform oneself, self-knowledge is essential.
Yeah,
I mean, that really drives home the point that we can't change what we don't understand.
exactly. And without that understanding of this, Krishnamurti argues, there's no basis for right thought or meaningful change.
Speaking of right thought,
Okay.
how does Krishnamurti distinguish that
Right.
from just well-thinking?
It's a fascinating distinction.
Okay.
He believes thought itself, while necessary for daily life, is often rooted in our conditioning and past experiences.
Yeah.
So it can actually limit our ability to see things clearly and to respond to situations in a fresh, unconditioned way.
So we're almost trapped by our own thought patterns.
In a sense, yes.
Wow.
He's not suggesting we should stop thinking altogether,
Right.
but he encourages us to become aware of how our thoughts shape our perceptions and actions.
So right thought is about observing those patterns without getting swept away by them.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
It reminds me of mindfulness practices, trying to create that space
Yeah,
between ourselves and our thoughts.
that's a great connection.
Yeah.
And it links directly to another key theme in the book.
Okay.
Fear.
Fear. Okay, let's unpack that.
Okay.
How does Krishnamurti view fear, and how does it tie into everything else we've been discussing?
He differentiates between the kind of physical fear that keeps us safe from danger and the psychological fear that arises from our thoughts and attachments. It's the second kind of fear. The fear of failure, the fear of loss, the fear of the unknown that he sees as a major obstacle to living a truly fulfilling life.
And how does that fear stem from our thoughts and attachments?
Krishnamurti argues that when we cling to security, to the idea of a fixed and unchanging self, it breeds this deep-seated fear of anything that threatens that sense of stability. So the fear of loss, for example, is often rooted in our attachment to the things or people we believe define us.
So the more we try to control and hold on to things, the more fearful we become.
That's the paradox he highlights.
Wow.
True freedom, he suggests, comes from recognizing the impermanence of everything. And letting go of that need to control.
It's interesting because so much of our lives are built around that idea of control. controlling our careers, our relationships, even our emotions.
Yeah.
Krishnamurti is essentially saying that's where we go wrong.
He's certainly challenging that deeply ingrained belief.
Wow.
He sees this constant striving for control as a form of resistance to the natural flow of life.
It's definitely a thought-provoking perspective.
Yeah.
You know, it strikes me that a lot of what Krishnamurti is saying resonates with the idea of personal growth.
It does.
Which so many people are interested in these days.
Absolutely. And speaking of personal growth, if you're looking for a little extra motivation and inspiration on your journey, you might enjoy the Affirmify Journey YouTube channel.
Okay.
They have some really uplifting content.
Great suggestion.
Yeah.
And I think it ties in nicely with what we're discussing here.
It's all about understanding ourselves better and finding ways to live more authentically and intentionally.
Okay, so we've touched on self-thought and fear.
Right.
What other core ideas from the book do you think are important for our listeners to understand?
Well, Krishnamurti doesn't shy away from the tougher aspects of the human experience. He dives into sorrow and suffering.
Okay.
And he offers a perspective that I think many people find both challenging and liberating.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Let's talk about that.
Okay. He doesn't see suffering as something to be avoided at all costs.
Right.
Instead, he views it as an inherent part of life.
So it's not about trying to eliminate suffering, but about understanding it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He argues that we actually intensify suffering by clinging to pleasure and trying to avoid pain.
Right.
He believes true freedom from suffering comes from a deeper understanding of life's impermanence and a willingness to accept the full spectrum of human experience.
That's a powerful idea. And it kind of turns our usual approach to happiness on its head.
Yeah.
It's not about chasing after good feelings and avoiding bad ones, but about recognizing that both are temporary and ultimately out of our control.
You've hit on a key point.
Yeah.
He's challenging us to shift our focus from trying to change our external circumstances to cultivating a deeper understanding and acceptance of ourselves and the world around us.
This is all incredibly thought-provoking.
It is.
And I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear more.
Right.
But before we go any further, let's take a quick pause and
Okay.
continue this deep dive in part 2.
All right. Sounds good. Welcome back. It's fascinating to delve into Krishnamurti's ideas,
It really is.
especially when they challenge conventional thinking about happiness and suffering.
We were just discussing how Krishnamurti views suffering
Right.
as an inherent part of life and how clinging to pleasure actually intensifies our pain.
Yeah,
It's a radical idea,
it is.
but it makes you think.
It does, and it ties into another core theme in the book,
Right.
the search for meaning and purpose.
Okay, let's talk about that. A lot of self-help books are all about finding your purpose, your passion,
Yeah,
your reason for being.
right.
What's Krishnamurti's take on that?
He flips the script, really.
Okay.
He suggests that this relentless pursuit of meaning might actually be a way of escaping the present moment.
So we're so focused on finding our purpose
Yeah,
that we miss out on living a purposeful life right now.
precisely. It's like we're constantly looking over the horizon, waiting for something to give our lives meaning
Right.
instead of appreciating the richness and potential of each moment as it unfolds.
But doesn't that feel a little nihilistic? Like, if there's no grand purpose,
Yeah.
what's the point of anything?
Krishnamurti's not advocating for nihilism at all.
Oh.
He's simply challenging us to reframe our understanding of meaning and purpose.
Okay.
He believes true meaning isn't something we find
Right.
out there in the world, but rather something that emerges from a deep understanding of ourselves and our relationship to life itself.
Okay, so it's less about finding the right career
Right.
or achieving certain milestones
Yeah.
and more about cultivating a certain way of being in the world.
Exactly. It's about living consciously,
Okay.
being present in our interactions, and engaging with the world from a place of awareness and compassion.
I can see how that could lead to a more fulfilling life,
Right.
even without having some grand preordained purpose.
He also points out something really interesting.
Yeah.
He says that the very act of living fully, of embracing life with curiosity and openness,
Yeah.
can be incredibly meaningful in itself.
That's beautiful. And it's a good reminder
It is.
that meaning doesn't have to be this big, elusive thing.
Right.
It can be found in the simplest of moments.
Yeah.
And the everyday experiences that we often take for granted.
Absolutely. He challenges us to see the extraordinary in the ordinary.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Self-knowledge, fear, suffering, and purpose.
Yeah.
But there's another aspect of Krishnamurti's work that I find particularly fascinating. His views on love and relationships.
Yes. This is where his insights get really nuanced, and I think particularly relevant for many people.
Okay, so how does Krishnamurti define love?
Right.
Is it about romance, or does it go deeper than that?
He definitely sees love as something far more profound than just romantic attraction.
Okay.
He describes it as a state of being.
Okay.
A way of relating to the world that transcends the limitations of the ego.
So it's less about finding the right person and more about cultivating a certain way of being.
Exactly. He argues that true love is free from possessiveness, jealousy, and the need to control.
That sounds incredibly challenging.
It is.
Especially in the context of romantic relationships.
He acknowledges that it's not easy.
Yeah.
But he believes that it's only when we are free from those ego-driven desires.
That we can experience love in its purest form.
But isn't some level of attachment necessary in a relationship?
Yeah.
I mean, how can you have commitment without some degree of possessiveness?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's one that Krishnamurti grapples with in the book.
Okay.
He's not advocating for detachment in the sense of indifference or emotional unavailability.
Right.
But he's challenging us to examine the ways in which we use and exploit others in our relationships.
Right.
Often in the name of love.
So it's about recognizing those unhealthy patterns of attachment.
Right.
And finding a way to connect with others from a place of genuine respect and freedom.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
He emphasizes the importance of allowing others to be who they are without trying to change them or mold them into our own image.
It's funny because we often talk about wanting a partner who completes us.
But Krishnamurti seems to be saying that true love is about two whole individuals coming together.
Right.
Each with their own unique path and journey.
That's a beautiful way to frame it.
Yeah.
And it speaks to his broader message about the importance of self-knowledge and self-acceptance as the foundation for any truly healthy and fulfilling relationship.
It's a powerful reminder that we can't truly love another until we learn to love and accept ourselves.
Exactly. And that self-acceptance, he believes, is essential not just for personal happiness, but also for creating a more just and compassionate society.
Okay. I'm interested to hear more about that.
Okay.
How does Krishnamurti connect individual transformation with societal change?
He was a staunch advocate for peace and social justice.
Okay.
But he didn't believe that those ideals could be achieved through external reforms alone.
Okay.
He saw individual transformation as the essential starting point.
So it's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
He argued that if we want to change the world, we must first change ourselves.
But isn't that a bit idealistic? I mean, one person changing their way of being isn't going to solve all the world's problems.
He recognized that it's a long and challenging process.
Right.
But he believed that individual transformation has a ripple effect. Okay. As more and more people begin to live from a place of awareness, compassion, and authenticity, it creates a shift in the collective consciousness.
So it's about planting those seeds of change, even if we don't see the full fruits of our efforts in our lifetime.
Exactly. He believed that each act of kindness, each moment of understanding contributes to a more just and compassionate world.
This is all incredibly inspiring.
It is.
But I'm curious to hear more about Krishnamurti's views on education.
Okay.
He was quite critical of traditional education systems.
Yeah, he was.
Wasn't he?
He felt that conventional education often stifles creativity and critical thinking, focusing instead on rote learning and conformity.
So it's less about nurturing young minds and more about churning out obedient citizens.
He was very concerned about that.
Wow.
He envisioned a very different kind of education. One that emphasized self-discovery, critical inquiry, and a love of learning for its own sake.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
But is it realistic? I mean, how do you measure success in a system like that?
He acknowledged that it would require a radical shift in our values and priorities.
Okay.
He believed that true education wasn't about grades or test scores,
Right.
but about helping individuals develop their unique potential and contribute to the well-being of humanity as a whole.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
Education as a means of not just personal growth,
right,
but also societal transformation.
Exactly.
It's a powerful reminder
It is
that we each have a role to play in shaping a better future.
And speaking of shaping a better future,
Yeah.
Krishnamurti's ideas are as relevant today as they were decades ago.
Right.
He offers a framework for understanding ourselves,
Right.
our relationships, and the world around us that is both profound and practical.
This has been an incredibly rich and insightful conversation. But I know our listeners are eager to hear more about the practical implications of Krishnamurti's ideas.
All right.
So let's continue this deep dive in part 3.
Okay.
Where we'll explore how we can apply his teachings to our own lives.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to our deep dive into What Are You Doing with Your Life? By Jiddu Krishnamurti. We've been exploring some pretty profound ideas about self-knowledge and suffering and love, and even the purpose of education.
It's been a great discussion.
But now I'm really curious to hear how all of this translates into practical action.
That's a great question, and it's one that Krishnamurti himself addresses throughout the book. He's not just offering abstract philosophical concepts. He's encouraging us to actually embody these principles in our daily lives.
So it's not enough to just read the book and nod our heads in agreement.
Yeah.
We actually have to do something with this knowledge.
Exactly. He's challenging us to move beyond intellectual understanding and into a lived experience of these ideas.
Okay, so where do we even begin? Krishnamurti covers so much ground.
Yeah, he does.
What's a good starting point for someone who wants to apply his teachings to their own life?
I think one of the most powerful and accessible practices he emphasizes is self-observation.
Okay, remind me. What exactly does he mean by self-observation?
Right.
We touched on it briefly earlier, but it would be great to unpack it a bit more.
He's talking about cultivating a mindful awareness of our thoughts, feelings, and actions throughout the day. It's not about judging ourselves or trying to change anything. It's simply about noticing what's happening within us without getting swept away by it.
So it's like creating that space between ourselves and our reactions.
Yeah.
Kind of like hitting the pause button before we respond to something.
That's a great analogy.
Oh, yeah.
He believed that by simply observing our thoughts and feelings without judgment, we could begin to understand the root causes of our suffering and find true freedom.
It sounds simple in theory.
It does.
But I imagine it's quite challenging.
Yeah.
To maintain that level of awareness throughout the day.
It definitely takes practice.
Right.
But even a few moments of mindful self-observation each day can be incredibly illuminating.
Okay.
It's like shining a light into the dark corners of our minds and seeing what's really going on.
So what kinds of things might we notice through self-observation?
We might start to see patterns in our thinking and behavior, for example.
Okay.
We might notice how certain situations or interactions trigger specific emotional responses.
And by becoming aware of those patterns, we can start to break free from them.
Exactly. He believed that awareness is the key to transformation.
Okay.
Once we see clearly how our minds operate, we can begin to make conscious choices about how we want to respond to life's challenges.
This is all starting to make sense, but let's get even more practical. What are some specific examples of how Krishnamurti's teachings might play out in our everyday lives?
Well, let's take the example of conflict in relationships.
Okay, perfect. That's something most of us can relate to.
It is.
How would self-observation help us navigate conflict more effectively?
Imagine you're having an argument with your partner.
Okay.
Instead of getting caught up in the heat of the moment, you take a step back and observe your own reactions.
Okay.
You notice the anger rising within you, the defensiveness, the urge to blame.
That's easier said than done.
It is.
Especially when you feel like you're in the right.
Of course. But even just recognizing those feelings is a huge step.
Right.
It allows you to create a little space between yourself and your reaction, which can prevent things from escalating.
So it's about taking a pause before we lash out or say something we'll regret.
Exactly. And it's not about suppressing your emotions.
Okay.
It's about understanding them. By observing those feelings, you might start to see the insecurity or fear that's driving them.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do we go from simply observing our emotions to actually changing our behavior?
Krishnamurti believed that real change happens not through force or willpower, but through understanding.
Right.
As we become more aware of our patterns and motivations, we naturally start to make different choices.
So it's not about trying to be a better person. It's about becoming a more conscious person.
That's a great way to put it. It's about waking up to who we really are and aligning our actions with our deepest values.
This is all incredibly insightful, but I'm wondering, how do Krishnamurti's ideas about right livelihood fit into all of this? We talked about that earlier, but I'd love to explore it further.
He places a lot of emphasis on finding work that is not only financially sustainable, but also ethically aligned with our values.
So it's not just about making a living.
Right.
It's about making a life that feels meaningful and purposeful.
Exactly. He challenges us to consider how our work contributes to the well-being of society as a whole.
But what about those of us who are stuck in jobs that don't feel aligned with our values?
Yeah.
Is he saying we should all quit our jobs?
Yeah, not at all.
And become social activists?
He recognizes that not everyone has the privilege or opportunity to make a radical career change. But he encourages us to find ways to bring our values into our work, even in small ways.
So it's about finding those little pockets of meaning and purpose within our current circumstances.
It might be about advocating for a more ethical business practice within your company, or finding ways to support your colleagues, or simply bringing a more mindful and compassionate attitude to your daily tasks.
That's really empowering.
It is.
It means that even if we can't change our jobs overnight, we can still make a difference in our own spheres of influence.
He believed that every action, no matter how small, has the potential to ripple outwards and create positive change.
It's amazing to think that something as simple as paying attention to our thoughts or bringing more awareness to our work can actually contribute to a more just and compassionate world.
That's the beauty of Krishnamurti's teaching.
Yes.
He shows us that transformation doesn't require grand gestures or heroic feats. It starts with the simple act of waking up to who we are and choosing to live in alignment with our deepest values.
This deep dive into Krishnamurti's work has been both challenging and inspiring. It's given me a lot to think about, both in terms of my own personal growth and my role in the wider world.
I think that's the gift Krishnamurti offers. A path towards a more conscious, compassionate, and fulfilling way of being.
And for those of you listening who want to explore these ideas further, I highly recommend checking out lingopediamagazine.com. They have a fantastic collection of courses and ebooks on personal development and self-discovery. It's a great resource for anyone looking to delve deeper into the world of Jiddu Krishnamurti and apply his teachings to their own lives.
That sounds like a valuable resource.
And as always, if you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe, share, and like this podcast. We'll be back soon with another thought-provoking exploration. Until then, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep striving to live a life that truly matters.